What happens when the biggest pop star on the planet walks into a morning show expecting a warm conversation, and instead finds herself stepping into an ambush that detonates live on national television? It began like any other polished morning inside the glowing studio of Good Morning America. The lights were already blazing by 7:58 a.m., bathing the set in that signature golden warmth designed to feel comforting through a screen. The glossy floor reflected the overhead panels like a still lake. Producers moved briskly along the edges, headsets on, whispering countdowns. The audience, tourists, superfans, a few contest winners, buzzed with anticipation. There was a hum in the air. A hopeful kind of energy. And then she walked out. Taylor Swift stepped onto the stage wearing a simple black blazer, light-washed jeans, and that effortless half-smile that had sold out stadiums across continents. She waved, soft and composed. The applause rose instantly, loud, affectionate, almost protective. She looked relaxed. Grounded. Like someone who had done this 100 times before. Across from her sat Lara Spencer, posture straight, cue cards resting neatly on her lap. To Lara's right was Robin Roberts, warm-eyed and steady. To her left, Michael Strahan leaned forward slightly, hands clasped. And at the news desk nearby, George Stephanopoulos shuffled papers as the red tally light blinked on. "Welcome back to Good Morning America," Lara began, smiling brightly. But if you looked closely, really closely, there was something tight around her eyes. Something sharper than usual. Taylor nodded graciously. "Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to be here." The first few exchanges were smooth. The new album. The tour. The fans. Safe territory. Comfortable laughter. The rhythm of television doing what it does best, creating the illusion of intimacy. And then it happened. Lara leaned forward slightly. Her smile thinned. "So," she said, voice light but pointed, "your new album just dropped and fans are going crazy over it. But I have to ask, when are you going to grow up and write about something other than your breakups?" The shift was almost invisible at first. A microscopic pause. A flicker in Taylor's eyes. A slight inhale from Robin. Michael's fingers tightened against each other. The audience didn't react immediately. They weren't sure if it was a joke. Taylor blinked once. Her expression remained polite, but something behind it hardened. "I'm sorry, what?" she asked gently. "Oh, come on," Lara waved dismissively. "We all know your whole thing is sad songs about guys who dumped you. Don't you think it's time to move on to more mature content?" There it was. Not curiosity. Not critique. Dismissal. A ripple passed through the studio. The warmth evaporated, replaced by something cooler. Thinner. Michael leaned in quickly. "Taylor, I think what Lara means is—" "No, Michael, let me finish," Lara interrupted, not breaking eye contact with her guest. "You're in your 30s. Still writing diary entries set to music. When do we get some real artistry?" Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer stiffened. Taylor sat up straighter. "Real artistry," she repeated slowly. "Yes," Lara said, crossing one leg over the other. "Something with substance. Not just another song about a guy who didn't text you back." Robin shifted in her seat. "Lara, I don't think that's—" "Robin, please," Lara cut in. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." But that wasn't true. Not everyone was thinking it. And now, no one was comfortable. Taylor's jaw tightened ever so slightly. Her voice, when she spoke, was controlled, almost unnervingly calm. "With all due respect, Lara, you clearly haven't listened to my music." A faint murmur from the audience. "Oh, I've heard it," Lara shot back. "It plays in every grocery store and shopping mall in America." Taylor's gaze didn't waver. "Then you would know," she said carefully, "that my last 3 albums explored folklore, fictional storytelling, grief, political anxiety, personal reinvention. And even if they were all about relationships, why would that make them less valid? Silence. Because it's repetitive, Lara shrugged. It's boring. Michael's smile was gone now. Serious music critics have said this for years, Lara continued. Taylor tilted her head slightly. You mean the same critics who gave my albums some of the highest ratings of my career? Lara smirked. Well. Your fanbase is mostly teenage girls. That's not exactly the demographic that defines musical excellence. And just like that, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The audience gasped. Not loudly. But enough. Taylor didn't react immediately. That made it worse. She slowly reached up and adjusted the microphone clip to her blazer. Her expression had changed completely now. The warmth was gone. In its place, clarity. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Did you just dismiss teenage girls as if their opinions don't matter? Lara hesitated. Just a fraction. That's not what No, Taylor interrupted softly. Please finish. Robin inhaled sharply. You were saying that because my fans are mostly young women, their taste in music is somehow less important. Is that right? The air felt thick. That's not what I said, Lara insisted, but her voice had lost its ease. That's exactly what you said. The audience began shifting. Some nodding. Some whispering. Phones subtly emerging. Taylor leaned forward now. Not aggressively. Deliberately. You just insulted millions of young women who support me. Women who see themselves in my music. Women who are allowed to decide what matters to them. Robin spoke firmly. Taylor's right. That was out of line. Lara's face flushed. Now wait just a minute, she snapped. I'm a host on this show. You're a guest. Taylor's eyes sharpened. A host who clearly didn't prepare for this interview, she replied evenly. A host who thought it would be fun to ambush me with insults instead of asking thoughtful questions. A beat. A long one. Michael stepped in again. Ladies, let's just take a breath. No, Taylor said quietly. Not angrily. Just firmly. I'm not going to take a breath and pretend this is okay. The audience was no longer passive. You could feel it. The energy had shifted sides. Lara stood abruptly. Maybe if you could take criticism, she said tightly, you wouldn't be so sensitive. Taylor rose too. But she didn't slam her chair. She didn't shout. She stood with composure. Criticism, she said slowly, would be discussing specific elements of my music with thoughtful analysis. What you did was mock me. And my fans. A camera operator swallowed. The red light on camera 3 blinked like a heartbeat. You're overreacting, Lara insisted. I think you're underestimating how disrespectful you've been. Taylor reached for her microphone. And in that second, before she unclipped it, before she decided what came next, the entire studio seemed suspended in midair. No one breathed. No one blinked. Because everyone knew. If she removed that mic, this would no longer be an interview. It would be history. And Taylor Swift's fingers were already on the wire. There is a moment, right before something explodes, when the world feels impossibly still. Taylor's fingers rested lightly against the microphone clipped to her blazer. Not pulling. Not yet. Just touching it. The small black wire looked fragile against the dark fabric. So thin. So breakable. The studio lights felt hotter now. The golden glow that had seemed warm minutes earlier now felt interrogative, harsh, exposing every expression, every micro-reaction. Across from her, Lara stood rigid, chin lifted in defiance, though the confidence she'd worn at the start of the segment was beginning to crack. It showed in the tightness around her mouth. The quick rise and fall of her chest. Robin's eyes moved between them carefully. Michael had shifted forward in his seat, elbows on knees, ready to intercept something that no one quite knew how to stop. George remained at the news desk, fingers pressed flat against the glass surface, watching. And the audience, once bright and eager, had gone eerily silent. Taylor unclipped the microphone. The sound of the small metal clasp snapping free echoed far louder than it should have. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. "I'm not overreacting," Taylor said quietly, holding the mic in her hand. Her voice was steady, but it carried a tremor, not of fear, but of restrained intensity. "I'm responding appropriately to being disrespected." Lara let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Disrespected? I asked a question." "No," Taylor replied, laying the microphone gently on the couch cushion between them. "You made a judgment. And then you wrapped it in sarcasm." Michael stood up. "Okay. Let's just reset here." "There is no reset," Taylor said, turning to him briefly. Her tone softened with him. "Michael, I appreciate you. I do. But this wasn't a misunderstanding." She turned back to Lara. "You questioned my artistry without knowing my work. You dismissed my audience because they're young women. And you implied that their voices don't count." Lara crossed her arms. "Defensive. You're twisting my words." Taylor tilted her head slightly. "Am I?" The audience murmured louder now. The atmosphere had shifted completely. It was no longer about music. It was about something deeper, about tone, about power, about who gets to define value. Robin stood. "That comment about teenage girls," she said firmly, looking at Lara, "that crossed a line." Lara's eyes flickered, just for a second, toward the audience. They were no longer smiling. A few were shaking their heads. One woman in the second row whispered something intensely to the person beside her. "I'm allowed to challenge a guest," Lara insisted. "Challenge," George's voice cut in calmly from the desk, "is not the same as belittle." All eyes turned to him. Lara looked stunned. "Are you seriously taking her side?" George's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried weight. "I'm taking the side of professionalism." That word lingered in the air. Professionalism. Taylor inhaled slowly, as if steadying herself. "I came here," she said, her voice softer now, "to talk about my music. My tour. The stories behind the songs. I didn't come here to defend whether teenage girls are allowed to enjoy what they love." The audience applauded lightly. Hesitantly at first. Then stronger. Lara's jaw tightened. "So that's it? You're walking off because I didn't flatter you?" Taylor's eyes sharpened again. "A diva would yell. A diva would cause a scene. I'm choosing to remove myself. You're being dramatic." "No," Taylor said calmly. "I'm setting a boundary." That word hit harder than any insult. Boundary. Michael stepped between them slightly, not physically blocking, but symbolically buffering. "Let's all breathe. Taylor, we truly didn't intend." "I know you didn't," she said gently, glancing at him and Robin. "And I'm grateful for that." Then she looked back at Lara. "But intent doesn't erase impact." The silence after that was deafening. Somewhere behind the scenes, a producer whispered urgently into a headset. Social media monitors were already lighting up in the control room. Clips were being cut in real time. The machine was moving faster than anyone on stage could see. Lara's voice lowered, colder now. "You know what I think? I think you're used to being worshipped. And the second someone pushes back, you can't handle it." The audience reacted audibly this time, gasps, disapproving murmurs. Taylor didn't flinch. "I've handled criticism my entire career," she replied evenly. "From tabloids. From radio hosts. From award shows. What I don't accept is being mocked for who listens to my music." Robin's disappointment was no longer subtle. But Lara continued, almost unable to stop herself. This is what's wrong with celebrity culture. We have to tiptoe around feelings. We can't say anything real. Taylor's gaze didn't waver. Honesty without respect is cruelty. A beat. You wanted authenticity. Taylor continued softly. This is authentic. The audience applauded again, louder now. Lara looked around, suddenly aware of the shift. The energy was no longer ambiguous. It had tilted. You're turning them against me, she accused. Taylor shook her head slowly. No. Your words did that. The red camera light blinked steadily. Millions were watching. Millions were forming opinions in real time. Michael ran a hand over his face. We're live, he muttered under his breath. Yes, Taylor replied quietly. We are. She reached down and picked up her purse. Robin stepped closer. Taylor, we are truly sorry this happened. Taylor's expression softened at that. Thank you. Lara threw her hands up. This is unbelievable. You're going to storm off because of one tough segment. Taylor paused. Then she turned fully toward Lara one last time. You didn't ask tough questions, she said, her voice now low and steady, almost calm in a way that felt final. You tried to make me feel small. And you tried to make young women feel irrelevant. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate. Lara's face flushed deeply now. You're going to regret this, she snapped. Walking off like this. People will talk. Taylor held her gaze. Let them. 3 words. Unshaken. She turned toward the studio doors. Cameras instinctively followed her movement. The audience parted slightly as she stepped down from the platform. Her posture was straight. Controlled. Dignified. But just before she reached the exit, Lara's voice cut sharply across the studio. You're acting like a spoiled celebrity who can't handle pushback. The words landed hard. The audience gasped again. Taylor stopped. Not dramatically. Just stopped. For a long second, she didn't turn around. Then slowly, she looked over her shoulder. Her expression wasn't angry. It was resolute. A spoiled celebrity, she repeated softly. No. I'm a woman who knows when she's being disrespected. The silence was absolute. And I won't stay somewhere I'm not respected. 7 words. Heavy. Clean. Final. She walked out. The doors closed behind her with a muted thud that echoed far louder than the earlier microphone snap. On set, everything fractured. Producers rushed forward. Robin removed her own microphone, visibly shaken. Michael exhaled deeply, staring at the empty doorway. George leaned toward the camera, his voice professional but strained. We'll be right back. The screen cut to commercial. But inside the studio, the chaos had just begun. Lara stood frozen near the couch, her earlier fire gone. The applause had faded. The audience energy now felt uneasy, like the aftermath of a storm. A producer approached quickly, clipboard clutched tightly. We need to talk. Now. Lara swallowed. In the control room, clips were already circulating online. Phones buzzed in the hands of audience members. Twitter feeds were exploding. Comment sections were igniting. 29 seconds. That's all it had taken for a single remark to ignite a firestorm. But the real consequences? They were just beginning. And backstage, in a quiet hallway outside the studio, Taylor had stopped walking. Her team surrounded her immediately, but she raised a hand. I'm okay, she said quietly. But her voice carried something deeper. Not triumph. Not anger. Something else entirely. And whatever that was, it would define what happened next. Backstage, the hallway felt colder than the studio. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, sterile and unforgiving. The distant muffled sound of commercial music drifted through the walls from the studio floor, but out here, everything felt suspended, like the air was holding its breath. Taylor stood still for a moment. Her team had formed a quiet circle around her, protective but unsure whether to speak. Her publicist's phone was already vibrating non-stop. Notifications stacking. Clips spreading. Headlines being written in real time. But Taylor wasn't looking at her phone. She was staring straight ahead. "I'm okay," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. One of her team members leaned closer. "You handled that perfectly." Taylor gave a small, tired smile. "I shouldn't have had to handle it at all." There was no victory in her voice. No adrenaline-fueled triumph. Just disappointment. A heaviness that comes when something unnecessary happens, and you know it could have been avoided. Back inside the studio of Good Morning America, the atmosphere had fractured. The commercial break wasn't long enough to repair what had just taken place. Robin Roberts stood with her arms folded tightly, her expression firm but deeply unsettled. Michael Strahan paced a few steps behind the couch, jaw clenched, replaying the moment in his head. George Stephanopoulos stared at the monitor in front of him, watching the replay of Taylor standing up, removing the mic, saying those 7 words. And on the couch sat Lara Spencer. Alone. Her posture had collapsed inward slightly. The sharpness that had defined her earlier tone was gone. In its place was something smaller. Something uncertain. A producer approached quickly, voice low but urgent. "Do you have any idea what just happened?" Lara swallowed. "I asked hard questions." The producer exhaled sharply. "You triggered a global headline." The red studio lights flickered back on. They were live again. George leaned forward slightly, his professional composure intact, but thinner than usual. "We want to acknowledge what just occurred," he began, voice steady but measured. "Our guest, Taylor Swift, chose to leave the interview during a segment that became contentious. We apologize to her, and to our viewers, for how that unfolded." Robin spoke next, her tone clear and deliberate. "We pride ourselves on respect here. And today, we fell short." Michael nodded slowly. "Taylor Swift is one of the most influential artists in the world. She deserved better." The camera cut briefly to Lara. She looked pale. "I was trying to ask challenging questions," she said quietly. Robin turned toward her fully. "There's a difference between challenging and cruel." The word landed. Cruel. Lara blinked, as if hearing it for the first time. The rest of the show continued, but it was mechanical. Hollow. The chemistry that normally flowed between the hosts was gone. Every laugh felt forced. Every transition stiff. And online. The explosion had already happened. Clips of the moment were everywhere. The microphone snap. The "teenage girls" comment. The words, "I won't stay somewhere I'm not respected." Within minutes, the phrase became a banner across social media. Shared. Quoted. Repeated. Not just by fans of Taylor Swift, but by women in workplaces, students in classrooms, employees in boardrooms. It was no longer about a pop star walking off a morning show. It was about boundaries. In her dressing room, Taylor finally sat down. Her phone lit up the small space repeatedly. Messages from fellow artists. From friends. From people who had been watching live. "You were strong. You were calm. You were right." She set the phone face down. Her manager sat across from her quietly. "You didn't lose control." Taylor nodded faintly. "That's because I didn't need to." There was a long pause. "I just wish," she continued softly, "that we were past this. The idea that teenage girls don't define excellence. That what young women love doesn't matter." Her manager didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because that was the real issue. Back on set, the final segment of the show wrapped with visible strain. The credits rolled, but no one stood up immediately. The audience filtered out in hushed conversations. Some were shaking their heads. Some were replaying the clip on their phones, already seeing it framed by headlines. When the cameras finally cut for good, the studio lights dimmed slightly. Robin approached Lara first. "What were you thinking?" she asked quietly, not angrily, but firmly. Lara looked down at her hands. "I thought if I pushed harder, we'd get something real." "You did," Michael said from behind them. "You got something real." But it wasn't what she expected. It was the real consequence of disrespect. George stepped down from his desk and joined them. "This will be studied," he said calmly. "Not as a viral moment. As a lesson." Lara finally looked up. The weight of it was settling in now. The replaying words. The audience's reaction. The online storm. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she murmured. Robin's response was quiet. "Intent doesn't erase impact." The same words Taylor had used. And that realization hit harder than anything else. Elsewhere in the building, network executives were already in emergency meetings. Screens displayed analytics climbing by the second. Hashtags trending globally. Debate panels forming. Public relations statements being drafted. One executive leaned back in his chair, watching the clip freeze on Taylor's final glance before she walked away. "She didn't yell," he observed. "No," another replied. "She didn't need to." Back in her dressing room, Taylor stood again. The weight on her shoulders seemed lighter now, not because the situation had improved, but because she had chosen her response. She picked up her phone. A new notification had just appeared. A teenage girl had posted a short message, "Today I learned I don't have to stay where I'm disrespected." Taylor stared at it for a long moment. That was the impact. Not the headlines. Not the clips. That. She slipped her phone into her bag. As she walked down the hallway toward the exit, the building felt quieter than before. The chaos remained behind closed doors, but she moved forward calmly, without hurry. Outside, cameras were already gathering. Reporters preparing questions. But she didn't stop. She didn't offer commentary. She didn't need to. Because her message had already been delivered, live, unscripted, unfiltered. Inside the studio, Lara remained seated long after the others had left. The silence pressed in around her. She replayed the moment in her head. The smirk. The comment about teenage girls. The audience's shift. The mic snapping free. 29 seconds. That's all it had taken. She had wanted to appear bold. Edgy. Fearless. Instead, she had revealed something else entirely. And that realization sat heavy in the now empty studio. Across the country, and across the world, people continued debating the moment. Some defended tough journalism. Others pointed to basic decency. Panels formed. Articles were written. The clip was dissected frame by frame. But beneath all of that noise, something simpler echoed. 7 words. "I won't stay somewhere I'm not respected." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm. And that calmness made it powerful. Because power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like choosing dignity over compliance. Sometimes it looks like knowing your worth, and refusing to negotiate it. The next morning, the studio lights at Good Morning America would shine again. The couch would be reset. The smiles would return. But something had shifted. Not just in that building. In the conversation. And as for Taylor Swift, she would go back to writing songs. Selling out stadiums. Telling stories. And somewhere in the crowd at her next show would be thousands of young women, teenage girls, singing every word at the top of their lungs. Defining excellence for themselves. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a walk-off. It was about a line being drawn. And once a line like that is drawn in front of millions of viewers, it doesn't disappear when the cameras shut off. It lingers. It echoes. It reminds. And maybe that's why the moment mattered. Not because it was explosive. But because it was clear. Respect is not optional. If you felt the tension in that studio. If you believe in standing up when something crosses the line. If you think moments like this matter beyond headlines. Make sure you like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more deep cinematic breakdowns, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the most powerful statement is simply walking away.